Tim is here. We've acquired you, Tim, in the transfer portal from Orange Nation for your Monday Leonard on Lex.
I'm still doing Orange Nation tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes. I'm putting you back in the portal after the show.
People are going to be really sick of Leonard on Lex.
So come up with something new to say tomorrow.
I don't know. Jordan coined that phrase, which, by the way, I don't think it ever really stuck. Besides Jordan has really pushed it every single time. Leonard on Lex. Like I get a text and it's not, "Are you coming on?" He says, "When are you doing Leonard on Lex?"
No, it's so you are coming on.
Yeah, he's really tried. It's like the Mean Girls line, like you're trying to make fetch happen, but it's just not happening. So
it's caught on this show, which doesn't help that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it has caught on more than I'm giving it credit for. Maybe Jordan's mad at me right now as he's hearing this. But anyway, yes, I was required out of the transfer portal. A mad dash from the airport. Not actually. It was actually an early flight, and I've been here for a little bit.
Tim drove at reasonable speeds. Cops. There was no speeding, and he used his blinker at every necessary situation. We acquired McAllister Mondays out of the portal a couple weeks ago, too. So we've been making moves.
I feel that actually has significance, you know.
No, that was
McAllister Mondays just rolls off the tongue more. You know, Mike is great. I think I'm below him on the transfer portal. Like, Mike is a 5-star. Mm-hmm. I'm, like a role player off the bench, a 3-star.
We're just all about making moves to the portal. That's as we know. That's what this.
You got to round out your roster, though. We know that
exactly.
These days, so.
Exactly. Hey, it's a long week, Tim. It's only Monday. Right. All right. So how about that? I mean, we were talking bubble last week, and now it's the 6th seed. That is the fine line of college lacrosse, right?
Yeah. Well, we always said if they go down there and they get hot at the right time, and heck, they could win a couple games. Why not? We knew they could beat Notre Dame for kind of the same logic, I guess, that Harvard is probably saying right now. Like, we can go into the Dome and beat Syracuse. We did it once before.
We just did it.
Who says we can't do it again? So, I thought they played great against Notre Dame. I thought they just had a better attitude about them this week in terms of playing freer, I would say, and just playing the game like you were when you were a kid. I think that was the big message from the team. It was interesting to hear a lot of the guys talk about how Michael Grace, who is in his first year at Syracuse, but is one of the veteran leaders on the team and has some championship pedigree because of his days at RIT. He won a national championship.
Right?
He won 2, you're right. And he's been in the Final Four. He's played in a ton of big games. And say what you want, D3, D1, that's still, there's only so many lacrosse teams and lacrosse schools out there.
The pressure's still there in those games.
Absolutely. So it was the same deal when Mason Cohn came over last year. He was a guy that had played in those big games, and he was immediately voted a captain, and he sort of imparted some wisdom from that time. Michael Grace kind of spoke up, and I guess what you could call was just a team meeting, kind of like just a planned sort of walkthrough deal the night before the first game. And the guys told me that he spoke up and was basically like, we just need to have more fun out there. We were playing tight. And, I think back to my time at RIT, and when we were, going on a run, when we were making clutch plays, it's because we were smiling. We were having a good time out there. And maybe it's because I heard about that, then I'm kind of keeping an eye out for it during the game. But, there was just that funny moment, I don't know if you saw, where Jimmy McCool was backing up an insignificant shot that was full field at the end of a quarter, and he did a fake dive to get closest to it when there was no one around him, which was just something Jimmy's kind of a funny guy. You do that.
Goalies are weird, yeah.
Yeah, right. When you're having fun, you do that type of stuff, and I think it was a huge weight off their shoulders to get the first win, of course, because then you knew you were in the tournament, and it was cool to see them kind of just play free and loose in back-to-back games now.
I think it's interesting, because you look at the 2 Notre Dame games this season, those are probably the 2 best games they've played in many ways. The Duke game stands out that, man, it's second game in 3 days. Everyone's tired. They won a grinder. They have not been winning grinders this year.
Yeah, I mean, they hardly ever win games 9-8 like that. And I know there's the stat that is still somehow alive of whenever Syracuse holds the opponents under 10 goals, they have won every game since 2012. I think it's 88 games or something at this point, which is pretty crazy. But it's not like this team has won that way, to your point. We've always kind of said, you got to be able to win both games in May. Does this team have the capability to win kind of a rock fight, grinder type of game? I do think it was a lot because it was the second game in 3 days and hot weather conditions, and those guys had to be a little bit tired on both sides of things. So I think the game just had a slower pace to it because of that. But it was great to see Syracuse win one game in a high-scoring manner, and then, like you said, that's the type of win they really haven't had in the Gary Gate era.
Yeah, it got a little nervy there down the stretch. But that's what happens in the playoffs. You don't win 4 in a row in the playoffs unless you're an all-timer team without a game like that.
Yeah, and I think we have said this, and it's almost like a cliche at this point. We say it a lot between you, me, Kyle, whoever else is talking about lacrosse here in Syracuse. The fact that, one, you got to be able to win a slow grinder game to make it to the Final Four, probably. The other thing that I've been saying a lot this week is a hot face-off guy and a hot goalie can take you really far in May. And Syracuse, at least in the ACC tournament, had John Mullen winning 79% of his face-offs in those 2 games. He was 13 for 17 yesterday. I mean, we're talking like there's a minute left in the game after Duke scores to cut it to 1. And I'm just sitting there with Kyle, and I'm like, yeah, Mullen's going to win this. We're fine. Like, that's the level of dominance that he had. Yeah. And he struggled against Brady Wambach a little bit, who was one of the best in the country in the last game of the regular season. We know he dominated Harvard the first time around. But if you're winning possessions like that, I mean, and then McCool's giving you 20 saves in the first game and gave you 8 saves in the first half against Duke, he's stopping pretty much everything that he needs to stop. Then Syracuse could go very, very far if those 2 guys keep playing like they did.
Did you say that 10-goal stat goes back 2012? Is it the Maryland game in the 2011 playoffs?
It's Notre Dame 8-6 they lost in I think it was a regular season game in 2012.
2012?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was pre-ACC, right?
No, that would have been Big East lacrosse.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That was was a thing.
That was a thing.
That was a thing. Yeah, cuz the 2011 quarters are the game that ruined Lax for a while. The Maryland quarterfinal lost 6-5, which is the game that just like haunts everyone that was involved in it.
Yeah.
Kind of kicked off Maryland's run here for the last 15 years. But now you got Harvard again, right? It's a game. You look at the stat. I still don't know how they lost the game.
No, makes no sense.
John Mullen won 28 of 32 faceoffs. Or the team did. I don't know if he took literally all of them.
No, he did. I think he took every one. He didn't have a violation in that game. Yeah.
He won 88% of the faceoffs. Syracuse led the game 5-0.
Yes.
Like, quickly. That was a game it started. It was like, oh, man, this is going to be a rout.
Yeah.
Then they lost. I don't understand what happened.
Well, honestly, Jimmy McCool played bad in that game. And we can say that because it was pretty much the only game he played bad all year. He's kind of struggled against the 2 Ivy League teams he's played, Cornell and Harvard. And Cornell everyone struggles against Cornell. You can understand that one. And I think the Harvard game was some of the defense not really, helping him out. But I think Jimmy would tell you himself that was basically his only off game of the season. And it's interesting because Gary Gate brought up a lot after that game how he was going against a lot of his high school buddies. And he's from Boston. Right. Obviously, Harvard, the makeup of their roster is a lot of guys from that area. So he knew a lot of guys that were shooting at him. And maybe in what was probably his 3rd or 4th start, I think at that point, he just got a little in his head over that. So, I'm sure he's excited to get another chance to go against his buddies and play like he's been playing more recently. Yeah, because that's the other side, right? Of hot goalie can take you far in May. It takes one bad goalie quartered to kill you in May. Yeah, so, and I think last year's team, it wasn't like the defense was the issue in terms of them not getting to the Final Four. It was probably some of the same stuff that we've talked about a lot of the offense and the sloppiness. I mean, they lost that game to Denver. I think it was 10-8 was the final score, so you can live with giving up 10 goals. But Will Mark was not trending up going into the playoffs.
He struggled late last year.
Yeah, he did. And he had some good moments in the postseason, and he still made some great saves here or there. But remember, he was pulled in the ACC tournament game, the one game they played when they got smoked by Duke.
Just lit up.
Yeah, and Jimmy had to go in there because I think the first 8 or 9 shots, he didn't stop any. Now, it wasn't all. I think Will Mark was a great goalie. Don't get me wrong. But goalies are streaky. Jimmy, actually, I feel is just a more reliable goalie in a way, or less streaky goalie. Not to say he's better than Will Mark, but
Mark was explosive at times.
Yeah, and Mark is just like this athletic dude that maybe wasn't always in the proper position, but he'd make this sprawling like kick save. Jimmy makes like nice saves, but it's because he's just technically sound.
Yeah.
And he forces a lot of shots wide of the cage because he's just in the right spot a lot. So
the last shot of the game Sunday, right?
Yeah, right. Which, I mean, Molliver would love to have another crack at that. That was a good play Duke ran, and I know that it would have been, just a lot of people complaining about the end-of-game execution if Molliver just puts that in like he did 5 times against Syracuse in the regular season. But he had an off game, and you're right, Jimmy was in the right spot on that play.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the Galloway years. That's what I always loved about John was his consistency. Like he didn't let shots get near him. It made it a lot easier when you're communicating well and you're keeping the ball away from him. So, all right, it's Syracuse Harvard. We kind of know that went wrong. You can win that game. What do you feel about the draw in general? That could be potentially Princeton at Hofstra next week if things go to form this week.
Yeah, I think the draw is good for Syracuse. I thought there was an outside chance that they would put them as the 5 seed just to kind of split up the Big Ten back to back, the 4 and the 5. It's likely, well, maybe I shouldn't say likely because Notre Dame is probably favored against Ohio State, honestly.
That could be a hell of a game.
Yeah, that'll be a great game in the first round, and it is kind of madness that Ohio State has to play Notre Dame. I get why it happens, but I was thinking they might put Syracuse in the 5 because their resume was pretty even with Penn State, and it would split it up. And I like Syracuse better. It's weird to say because they are 0-2 against the Ivy League this year with the loss to Harvard and then the road loss to Cornell. But I think their style fits the Ivy League style more than the Big Ten, and how Maryland has beaten them over the years. I think Ohio State or a Penn State would maybe be able to kind of slow the game down and make it more of a grudge match, patient. Like Harvard is probably going to be a double-digit high-scoring game once again, and Princeton will probably be in that 15-14 range if they do meet in the quarterfinal rounds. I could see both of those games being very fun to watch. And as much as they did prove they can win in that other way, and they're probably going to need to win in that other way, especially if they, make it to the Final Four and it's Maryland sitting there as the 2 seed. We know they got to win in that other way and be able to slow it down. But I think it was a better draw to see the Ivy League than, say, the Big Ten in your first couple rounds.
Anything surprising to you about the bracket last night? It looked, I know Army didn't make it, but, to Kark's point, unfortunately for them, the numbers just didn't say they should have this year.
Yeah, nothing really surprised me. I think it's, like I said, it's sort of a bummer that I think Ohio State is national championship good.
They're playing really well.
Yeah, and now they got to play Notre Dame, who is the 2-time defending national champs. They're coming off a loss. They have all kinds of championship guys on that team that have been there and done that the last couple years. So that's just an awful draw overall for Ohio State. And on the Army discussion, Kyle and I had 45 minutes to talk about this because there was a weather delay on Friday.
Just a short one.
Yeah. We hashed out every single RPI number you could ever imagine. And it is just they didn't schedule hard enough in their non-con this year.
No.
And, I know Gary Gate, a lot of people still get on him for little stuff in game or whatever, but I think one thing that we probably don't give him enough credit for is the fact that he has scheduled very hard recently.
Yes.
And he has avoided the problem of what Army ran into, which I do think Army is a much better team than Harvard. Like if they were playing tomorrow, I would say,
I think almost everyone would pick Army.
Yeah, and I think Army has a way better chance to make it to the Final Four. Army might have a better chance to make it to the Final Four than 3 or 4 teams that are in the field. That are at-large teams in the field. So, yeah, but I think they just didn't schedule tough enough in the non-con, and some of that is they didn't get that game with Syracuse and couldn't come to terms. Yeah,
which very ironically is generally played the exact day that Syracuse played Harvard this year, which is the reason that it all led to this.
Yeah, but I think Gary deserves a lot of credit because he pores over the RPI metrics and what you need, and he spends a ton of time looking ahead to scheduling for the next year when it's, in the middle of the season even, you have to do it at that time. And he's trying to figure out, okay, Towson won their league last year. We want teams that won their league. And if you go look at who Syracuse played in their non-con, even the teams that we knew they were going to beat, like a Jacksonville, they had an okay year, or Towson had a pretty good year, and all that helps in your RPI because, yes, you want to play top 20 teams, but you also just can't afford to play.
You can't play bad teams.
You can't play bad. That's the biggest thing, and, a lot has been made about Army scheduling Mercer. Those type of games can really kill your RPI.
Yeah, you can't afford multiple of those games. But,
Yeah.
I mean, go figure. What's crazy, if Syracuse had played Army that week instead of Harvard, and Syracuse had won the game, Army might have made the tournament.
I know, that's the thing.
And then Army would have been back. It would have been the opposite. Army might have been in the Dome this week for that game, but
yeah.
What can you do?
And I think when the Army game fell through, they had to pivot to Manhattan, which was the one team that is really outside the top 50 in the RPI that Syracuse played this year. And you can have one, but you can't have multiple.
No, you can't have multiple. All right. There we are. Sunday, 5 o'clock. Tim and Kyle over on TK starting at 4:30, not 7:30.
I know. What?
Yeah.
It's because of Cornell?
I've heard apparently Cornell was literally, of the 8 times this weekend, that was the only one they were available. I've not heard of why.
I had always heard maybe there was a chance you could schedule it earlier, but from Syracuse.
It's never actually been tight.
Yeah.
Like, they get it turned over quickly. That said, you don't want to promise it when you don't have to. Like, because I don't think it's a complicated turnover as far. It's not like moving the court and all this stuff. Like, I mean, they have it down to a science. It's just a stage and a bunch of chairs, but you still got to do it.
Yeah.
And you got to clean the building. Like, there's a lot you got to do. So, but I'm sure it'll be done. All right, looking forward to that on Sunday. Okay, we'll take a break. We'll get Mike in here. A little 411. It's next. Q Sports Talk, ESPN Radio.